What Sarah and I will be talking about is, first of all, to give you an idea of what the Research Computing Service is. You may not have heard of us before. And also, in particular, we would like to talk about data storage, which ties in very closely with the university's research data management project that is just about to start, probably early next year. So that's to answer your question immediately. So I will start by saying a few more general things about the service. And Sarah will then talk of how we can help you manage your research data and related storage. If there is any service that you feel we should provide and we aren't currently providing, please let us know, because we are at relatively early stages in working with science schools. So we are also keen to have your feedback on the services that we are providing and what would be useful to you. At the end of this session, there should still be time for questions and answers. The Research Computing Service dates back to 2003, when I was appointed Arts Computing Advisor. The job title suggests that this initial service was very much targeted at the needs of the arts faculty. One of the outcomes of the restructuring exercise of IT services in 2011 was that we were asked to expand our then art-specific service provision to cover the needs of the sciences and of medicine. Towards the end of the year, the university approved 2 posts, one of which is Sarah's posts, to allow us to expand our services. There are various contexts for our service. The internal context for the service is quite obviously determined by university strategies. And since last year, the Research Data Management Roadmap, which was written in response to requirements from the EPSRC to get to grips with research data management. In addition to internal contexts, there are external contexts under which we operate. Most importantly, funder requirements, but also academic workflows. You may be quite surprised to hear academic workflows as external context. The reason for that is that with quite a few research projects, there's a need for collaboration, which means cross-institutional working practice. And also we are aware that a lot of research takes place within communities that are either developing or already existing and that have already existing tools in place. Since my appointment, the service developed to interface very closely with research processes and to fit in with the university's strategic goal, research excellence. We aim to provide a service that is of nationally and internationally recognized quality and standards. We are a team of 4. Within the team, we've got 2 liaison posts, that's myself and Sarah. And we've also got 2 applications developers working alongside us, implementing technical components of projects. As you can see, we come from very diverse academic backgrounds, which puts us into a position to relate within the team to quite a variety of research contexts. As you may have gathered just looking at the composition of the team, there are 2 strands to the Research Computing Service. One is Liaison Services, the other strand is Development Services. And as a team, we are able to provide more generic advice. For example, with applications for research funding, we are able to deal with the technical components of such applications. And we are also able to deal with any technical development work that is required. Finally, we are getting involved in infrastructure projects that are of interest to research. For a few years now, we've had an image database that I am going to say a few more things about later on. But we are also getting quite heavily involved with technical solutions for research data management. Although we are part of the corporate environment of a central service unit, i.e. IT services, the Research Computing Service has got quite a few liberties within IT services as concerns our procedures and service internal workflows. As part of our Liaison Services, we are trying to bridge the gap between the more corporate environment and researchers. For example, with research projects, we are not tied to the university's project management approach, i.e. Prince2, but we are able to use a more iterative approach that, based on our experience, works better with research projects. We've also established very close working relationships with national support bodies such as the Digital Preservation Coalition or the Digital Curation Center. And where this is advantageous, we can liaise with these bodies to increase the expertise that's available to individual research projects. At the same time, it is important to us to work very closely with research funders wherever possible, so to get an early warning of where there are changes that might affect our service provision or that might affect the way how applications are being submitted. For example, I am also on the HRC Peer Review College as a technical reviewer. Now then, let me say a bit more about research projects. This at present is very much focused on the arts faculty, so if there are things that we need to adapt to fit in with sciences, then please feed this back to us. The service starts at pretty much at pre-application stage, where we can help academics develop their own ideas. It helps us to gather technical requirements at a very early stage, technical meaning software requirements, hardware requirements, potential bespoke development needs. The beauty for us is that such early involvement helps us to plan our service. So if and when the research project is approved, we've had time to plan and where necessary and appropriate implement technical solutions. Another advantage is that where there is a cost element and it is appropriate to include this in applications for funding, this can be done. Once a project is successful, we again go back to the academic, just confirm requirements. Our experience is that although a research project gets funding, between application stage and actual funding stage, there have been developments, so we make sure that we are still up to scratch. Once we've gone through this confirmation process, we start, where appropriate, technical development work. For arts projects, we've got our own storage solution in place, which are also backed up by the university, and we can deal with any bespoke training requirements on the project. Because we are permanent members of staff at the university, we are not going to leave once a project is finished, but we can provide a service after the project has finished in terms of dealing with technical maintenance work and also hosting research outcomes. Okay, from a funder perspective, we've had very good feedback about the service that we are providing. when funders are looking at applications, they are looking at the quality of applications, at the technical support that is available to the project, and also at the institutional commitment. Not all funders have got a data or technical review process in place, but there are discussions ongoing of extending the review process to cover technical and data components. The Arts and Humanities Research Council is so far the only council that has got quite a strict technical review process in place, and over the past years we've been able to help with that. So, for example, we've been, through writing technical components of applications for funding, we've been able to reassure the funder and inspire confidence in the applicant. It has also been very interesting for us to observe that last year, where we had a very technically demanding project, the reviewer said, this hasn't been done before, it's a very ambitious project, so there is an element at risk, but they also looked at the work that we've done before, and based on this, they were satisfied that the project would be successful and provide relevant feedback then to the council. It is reassuring to know that our expertise is not just valued within the university, but in my capacity as peer reviewer for the AHRC, I've also had feedback from the Director of Research, Mark Levelin, in June this year, expressing their gratitude for the contribution that we've provided to the AHRC review process over the past year. To close the circle, there are quite a few comments that we are receiving from researchers in the Faculty of Arts, and the huge majority of those comments confirm that the service that we are providing is valued and useful, and also that we've been able to improve research projects, turning them into better projects through our understanding of how technology can work. Over the past couple of years, we've been involved in quite a few funding applications. This is a list of successful projects that we are currently working on, and in total, we've helped academics attract approximately £4 million over 2 years. This is all that I would like to say at this stage about the research computing service as it has been provided to date to the Faculty of Arts. I indicated earlier that we are planning to, or that we are in the process of expanding our service, and this expansion goes in 2 strands. First of all, we are looking at expanding infrastructure solutions that we are already providing. The second strand is to work more closely with schools in the sciences and the School of Medicine. In terms of infrastructural solutions, we've already got an image database in place that is at present used by academics in art history, in classics, and in history, but potentially it can be made available to any academic with image storage needs for research or teaching. The database works on a collection basis, and there can be access restrictions either to the individual or to a group or to a school, or the image database can be, or the image collection can be available to the world at large. That's the choice of the collections owner, that is the researcher inputting images or wanting to upload images. Last year, we've also worked very closely with the library, supporting their digital humanities efforts, and to this end, we've developed a digital collections repository for the library you're likely to hear more about that from the library in due course, so that's currently being filled with content. At present, we are working very closely with the head of Research Data and Information Services, who is also placed in the library and who is the project lead of the Research Data Management project. And work at present focuses on a software package called Mechan. This is to investigate the possibilities of using Mechan for a future data repository within the university. We are liaising with colleagues at the University of Oxford. Oxford University IT Services have developed a software package that's called ORDS, or Online Research Database Service. And ORDS, once it is fully mature, will allow researchers to set up online databases just via a web browser interface and without any programming skills. So this sounds very interesting, and it sounds potentially like an easy solution for the publication of data sets. A bit further down the line, we know that there is a huge requirement for systematic video storage. We are looking at setting up a video database potentially along similar lines as the current image database, but at present we haven't got the infrastructure in place to allow us to do it yet. The second strand, work with schools. This very much interfaces with more infrastructural solutions. We are looking at research data storage very much at this point in time, because this is a very fundamental requirement for anything else that we are going to embark on. We are going to be heavily involved in the research data management project, and this is also where your requirements for storage are very useful, because the research data management project will aim at putting an infrastructure, a technical infrastructure for research data in place, and there are some strategic decisions needed from the university, and without your feedback, it is likely that the solution that is being put in place is not going to meet all of your needs. In addition, we are also trying to understand your requirements so that we can develop our service to meet actual needs within the sciences. I keep talking about research data management, and I've mentioned that there are drivers from external funders to put data management practices in place. In addition to funding bodies, there is external pressure also from government. Last year, in a speech to the Royal Society, George Osborne, for example, alluded to the importance of data for future scientific discovery, and he also linked scientific discovery to economic growth. To enable data-driven discovery, as he put it, a transformation in data management is needed. Now then, there are obvious external pressures on us to respond. If we are looking at the current solution that we've got, or at the current situation within the university, we know that approaches to data storage differ from one school to another. Last year, the university has put in a storage area network, SAN. This was an investment of £1 million. This has given us 500 terabytes of replicated storage. This storage is mainly aimed at web space, dealing with the storage requirements of corporate databases, and at providing some networked storage to staff and students. One thing that wasn't considered, and this is important, is the SAN has not been spec'd to deal with research data requirements. Earlier this year, that is in January and February, we asked computing officers across the university to provide us with feedback about storage requirements for research data within their respective school. 15 out of 19 schools and 3 research centers responded to the survey. The format in which responses were received varied from a summary response per school or research center to receiving a compilation of forms completed by researchers. For a number of schools, computing officers have pointed out that participation from researchers in the survey was very low. So, for example, we had 5 researchers out of 61 responding for one school and 11 out of 30 for another. Given the response rate, it is inevitably that survey outcomes presented here are unable to provide a full picture of the university's research data storage need. After we received the feedback from computing officers, we compared the outcome of the data audits carried out in 2011, and where we had identified additional needs, we added these. As a final step, we looked at research data storage needs that had been received by IT services over the past year, and at data that we are currently already storing at the research computing infrastructure. Where we found gaps, we added these additional requirements. In total, we identified a storage requirement of 1.36 petabytes of research data, and this research data is active data, i.e. data that you are currently working with. We also identified that this data, active data, is increasing by 10% each year. In addition to active data, we identified approximately 600 terabytes of archival data, i.e. data that just needs to be stored but that doesn't form part of current research activity. These 600 terabyte based on the service increase by 20% each year. Given the relatively low response rate, it is inevitable that these figures are incomplete, and we are probably scraping the tip of the iceberg. Interesting figures that came out of the survey were that only 0.14% of the university's research data is stored on centrally provided storage. There is an approximately 19% of research data that is currently stored on staff computers. 15% is stored on external storage media. 5% is stored in the public cloud. At present, researchers do not use external data centers for permanent storage of their data, and only one respondent identified storage of research data on their home computer, and it is likely, or our expectation is that this proportion is a lot higher. Yes, you're laughing already. Now then, there are quite a few risks associated with current storage practices. Thanks to Jackie, we also received a response from the School of Psychology. This response was based on 8 individual responses from researchers. We do have anecdotal evidence that these storage needs are by far incomplete. So we have heard from another researcher that they hold several terabytes, and we keep hearing rumors of quite a few terabytes of storage. So what we need is we need your help. There is the clear need that we need to adjust our services to support data-driven sciences. So we need the storage. We also need to get to a position to support research data management as required by research funders. I already said earlier that storage is fundamental, and in the current situation, the research data that we know of already fills the current storage area network 3 times over. The university, as part of the research data management project, will need to come to a strategic decision on how this problem is going to be tackled. And to help with that decision, it is really important that we get feedback on your needs, because only if we understand what your requirements are, then we can provide a service that is targeted to your needs. I'll now hand you over to Sarah, who will say a few more things as to what is involved.
Okay, so moving on to storage. Excuse me, we're all completely aware that without careful backup practices in place, there is a real risk of losing data. And this can occur through accidental or malicious damage, and through modification or deletion, hardware failure, loss or theft. And understanding the nature of research data will provide huge insight into the backup requirements for a given project. Knowing the change frequency of data will identify the need for full backups versus incremental backups. Funder policies, ethics and legislative requirements will provide guidance on how sensitive data should be managed and how long data backups are required to be stored. And having identified these, it's important to establish what backup services are then available and who is responsible for routine data backups. So digital storage media can be inherently unreliable, and without proper management, file formats and physical storage media will inevitably become obsolete. To prevent unauthorized access or changes, data security needs to be considered, and encryption is a very important concept when handling confidential or sensitive information. Strategies for reliably disposing of data sets is a very important part of managing data. And understanding retention periods is of crucial importance in adhering to ethical and legal requirements. And collaborative research has many challenges in data sharing, exchange, storage, accessing and retrieval of data. So data storage, both in terms of digital and non-digital data, requires careful management and should be taken seriously from the beginning of a project. And careful consideration should be given to the likely volumes of data, including the storage costs involved at the planning phase of a project. And this is something that our team can help you with. And researchers will find themselves dealing with storage issues throughout the life cycle of a project. And the first thing I have to say is this slide is very busy, but research data management is a demanding discipline. And I use the term discipline because I firmly believe that research data management is not simply a technology, but it is a discipline, and it involves people and processes and technologies and methodologies. The research data lifecycle is viewed as a cyclical model to collect, record, store, and steward data from collections planning and design to sharing endpoints. And the various data phases are said to be data-centric in that they will depend on the use and/or generation of data. Principal investigators need to consider the formative questions and tools to shape the design of a robust data set with an extended life. And although I'm going to approach this slide starting at the hypothesis stage, the system triggers will illustrate a non-comprehensive list of where a researcher might find themselves stepping into the cycle. So there are various research data management storage considerations throughout the life cycle, which our team can help you with. So during the data collection process, there are questions around accessing, interpreting existing data sets, the metadata standards, sharing agreements, access restrictions, and these questions can all heavily influence the initial storage requirements. We can assist in providing appropriate storage solutions for managing data at this phase. But we can also get involved during the data processing phase, where elements such as data analysis and data sharing require careful consideration, and we can potentially offer innovative IT solutions to enhance the research potential in those data sets. Storage at this point requires a different type of consideration, as components such as elastic scratch space may be required as iterations of models are run. As we move on to data discovery, we can provide advice on systematic data storage, helping to decipher between incremental or full backups. And we can make considerable savings, both in respect to time but also in money. And as we move further along the life cycle into data publishing and archiving, we can address the more long-term data storage solutions involving the outcomes. And we can provide advice and technical support in relation to electronic resources. And of course, as we all know, this is dictated by demanding subject-specific funder requirements, such as that as the EPSRC. And the expectation is there that data will be made open access, and it's already part of the RC UK open access policy that was released in April of this year. And we can tailor your storage solutions and research computing requirements to manage these funder requirements as you move along the research life cycle, ensuring that you arrive where you need to be at the completion of a project. And this will avoid any issues with data reuse and sharing and make retrospective metadata processing a thing of the past. So this particular document was produced by the University of Leicester, and they refer to it as a research data health check. And it's an effective means of advertising how they can help their researchers to secure and share and exploit their research data sets. And it addresses various data considerations depending on where a researcher finds themselves along the research data lifecycle. It highlights the funder requirements, making data available for reuse, and it mentions having a written research data management plan, and it raises the questions around ethics and governance of data. These are all very relevant questions, and they involve quite considerable challenges for researchers. And I'm not going to dwell on this particular slide any further, but just to kind of part and say that there are a lot of responsibilities around research data management. So the Research Computing Service are working closely with schools and the library to monitor these funder developments to ensure that we have a complete picture, so that we are in a strong position to help develop services to support research data management. And my colleague Birgit has already mentioned the recent storage survey conducted earlier this year. And we can meet with research groups to assist in their workflows. We can advise on existing storage devices in use and work within your current working practices to ensure that you are maximising the facilities that are available within the university. But also we can ensure that you are requesting the most appropriate solutions to your heads of school and to IT departments. Our aim is to understand your workflows and to provide tailored solutions that are going to work for you and your subject-specific needs. I come from a strong research background. I know that research requires a flexible, individual, unique solution to maximise the research potential within each data set. I've already spoken with some of your colleagues in addressing some of their individual storage needs. I can meet with you and it takes approximately an hour, and I will document our discussions and ensure that individual requirements are taken into consideration during the development of any institutional strategies going forward. So by working with us, we're hoping that you can turn this into this. So thank you for your time.
Anybody got any questions? Microphone?
How easy would it be to set up almost the equivalent of a Dropbox-like thing, but on our office machines? So I have my data there, and then I have copies of it at home. They're backed up with a resistant server at home as well. But the pain is that they're sitting there on my office computer, and I just don't, I could swamp my space. But if there was a way just of being able to say, I want this folder just to have an incremental backup, where I keep my data. Do you see what I mean? The biggest pain is that I need to have access to it, be able to change it, and I don't want to have to continually remind myself about backing it up. Whereas if there was a way of making my folders essentially like a Dropbox, that would make it so much easier. I just set a parameter in the ideal world. I do the same with my documents. I can then use these facilities without having to use them. Is that feasible?
Our systems team, who have been setting up the Liaison for the past few months, are looking at Dropbox-like solutions.
Did you not trial Probox?
Did I not try so?
Try Probox. Were you not on the list of the Probox trial? No, I sent an email around the school saying that you could trial Probox. That, I
But
think,
is
Kira
that
tried
like
it.
Dropbox in the sense that there's actually quite a lag, so when I'm reading in my 10,000 little files, if they're coming over the
It was
services,
behaving like
it's like-
Dropbox in the sense that it would synchronize files from various locations, etc.
Right.
But whether they'll go ahead with it, I don't know. And whether it's actually appropriate for research data, I don't know.
So it's also horrendous security things.
Well, Probox, the point of Probox was that it would be hosted on university equipment. It wasn't
Right.
actually externally hosted.
Just of course the problem is that if we all decide to do it, these 3 terabytes, or the 500 terabytes, most of which is already reserved, will disappear in seconds. So every staff computer.
That's the biggest problem at the moment, is there is no central solution for data storage, I think.
Yeah. Well, there is a chunk of the storage area network that hasn't been allocated yet, but yes, you are right. It is insufficient to cater for all research data storage needs. So this is why I pretty much urge everybody who's got substantial storage needs to get back to us. We need the feedback that the storage that we are providing is insufficient as evidence for a request that we need to put to the university to invest into more storage. Because what is happening is, if we go to the university and say we need 5 petabytes of storage, we are asked for evidence who needs it and what are their storage requirements. Because it's such a substantial investment that needs to be made.
Have you actually got a feedback form or anything online, or do they just email you as their requirements at the moment?
At present, we haven't got anything online. If we receive emails that are sent to research computing rather than to individual accounts, they are getting logged via the help desk call management system. So this means there is a log. Everybody within IT services potentially is able to see what is coming in, but we'd still be keeping track on providing a systematic overview of requirements that is being fed back to the research data management project. At the same time, I am not sure how well known this is at present. The research data management project is intended to start off with an academically led review. So if any of you have got the time or feel very strongly about certain aspects, there is likely to be a chance to feedback, and that goes straight to university's senior management group.
I had a question and a suggestion. The question is, you said that the large-scale video storage was going to be started on in the new year in some way. Have you any idea when it might actually be working?
We need the storage in place to start with.
Yes, have you any idea when that will be?
It is part of our current operational plan within IT services. If that plan was met, it would mean at some point next year. Realistically, I think we are probably talking longer than that, 2 or 3 years.
And the suggestion, bearing in mind that I remember getting your survey, is it might be worth reissuing it with specific examples of each of the types of possible requirement, because frankly it meant absolutely nothing to me. I recognised a lot of the IT speak in your talk today, and I still don't know what much of it means, but probably it means things I really need. You know, with a little if you force yourself to give a specific example, for instance, this would fall in this category, I think a lot more people would say, oh, well, I have a need that's just like that. It probably fits in that category. And you might get a much bigger report.
There was an aspect of that. We tried to simplify a little bit so or provide support in weeks what you were reading. But I think there's also the aspect of Birgit's point of view is knowing how you work with your data that can be different from each school. So I don't know where you want to move on from this, if you want further discussion on it, or how you guys, one, how would you like to proceed with this, and how would you like to proceed with it? Do you want one-to-one meetings with them, or would another meeting like this be useful to discuss data, or what do people think?
I know what storage requirements I need. So.
You know exactly what you need and requirements.
I can certainly meet with any researcher and go through a series of questions just to try and decipher what you have, because sometimes you just have to sit back and think, and I can just kind of ask pertinent questions that will just enable me to understand you and you to understand me, and get it documented and represented.
Presumably you'd have much more power for getting money from the university if you have a larger feedback database in your questionnaire. At the moment it must look as if people don't care much. I'm sure they do.
Do you have any police-like requirements? Because, I mean, say I've got, well, we have several terabytes of data. It's not very well organised, but we do need to store it. I mean, if the universities can take that over, the central storage, that would be great. But, I mean, do you think, would you sort of police it and say, well, that's not very well organised, you shouldn't really be storing all that? I mean, or can we just, do you just open up your archives and say, yeah, we'll take the stuff?
Okay, that is probably going to be a strategic decision, looking at what funders are asking. I was at a workshop where all funders were represented and discussing research data management back in April, and the funder really wants that. First of all, the researcher makes a decision as to what data is valuable for research.
Yeah,
and that,
I understand it. If I have a new project from EPSRC, there's a specific requirement to house that, to store it with the university and make it available. But we're all sitting with an increasing amount of data on lab computers, and one could look to Institute for support in keeping that. And I suppose my question is a little bit cheeky. I mean, some of that is publicly funded research. Some of it is stuff that's got. Some of it's not. Do you see the university taking on a central role in storing whatever is necessary for researchers, or only for specific RC UK funded research that needs that can be justified to be stored? What I'm asking is, what are you opening your doors to? Everything, or just RC UK funded research? And if it's everything, then, I mean, you can already see you're swamped because you don't have the 9 petabytes and growing. What are the limitations? Because we've all got stuff and we'd love to transport it to you.
First of all, what we should be doing should come from you rather than from us.
Good.
So
yeah.
you say what I find very sensible, that the university should look after all research data, whether we can offer local storage or whether there are going to be third-party contracts, say with data centers. That is another matter, and that's a decision for the university to make. But what I see from your perspective is that there is a lot of data out there produced in different ways,
yeah.
And only if it is possible to merge this data, to query it, different data sets together, you get
that's the biggest benefit.
The biggest benefit, and this is why I put George Osborne up. Effectively, what he has been saying. So pretty much you need access not just to a specific data set, but there are data sets out there that perceivably you could use for your research, and if you considered what's in those data set, you'd benefit. So we need solutions in place, and we need to work towards achieving that interlinked data sets and that make them retrievable in a meaningful way. So from that perspective, there needs to be an infrastructure in place that can cope with any research data that is of value.
So the response to the last question, I think, taps into a fundamental confusion, I think, around this. Because I think, the sort of thing that Mike was talking about and Dave was talking about, and certainly would be the case with my data. My data is never going to be assembled into a massive database that mega computers at the NSA could actually make sense of. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there is no sense in which my data is going to be part of big data analysis, right? It's not that kind of data. And I think a lot of the rhetoric around this is really talking about a different kind of data, right? And so that's why, certainly for me, and perhaps for some of my colleagues, we ignore all of this, right? Because the language around it is just not relevant, right? But we do have a lot of small, very idiosyncratic data sets, right? Some of which is published, some of which is not. Each data set has a slightly different question, and so there's different items and different things and so forth. And we of course are concerned about backing that stuff up. So, like Mike, I have mine backed up on a 2 terabyte drive at home, as well as on my laptop, etc., right? So we take care of our data backup needs in that kind of way, because what we need is the Dropbox solution, right? What we need is just, however we've organised our stuff, as however disorganised it might be, and however idiosyncratic it might be, if there's a higher level of security on offer than what we provide ourselves, then that's great, right? But it's never going to fit into that kind of goal of somehow a data analyst kind of looking at it and helping us to kind of bring it all together. There is no bringing together, you know what I mean? So I think we're really talking about fundamentally different kinds of data. And when we just talk about it as data management, it kind of really loses that kind of structure.
Can I just to add to that, I know of 4 groups around the world who have been desperately trying for over a decade to get the metadata to store simple neurophysiological data. Ain't working. What you have is a data set with all the details in it, and essentially the details are what's in the paper. So each study that we do, we're changing so many different things, so many different ways, that actually building metadata for the big data sets just isn't happening. And that's within one little bit of neuroscience, of single unit stuff. It's just not working. They're trying with EEG, they're trying with the fMRI data, and the problem is that our experiments are so idiosyncratic that the notion of metadata really doesn't apply. I think Dave's thing was, he's got data from...
It's dirty data. You're forward-looking, and we can work towards that, but we're going to we're stuck at the moment with tons of old stuff going back 20 years, and we still need to store it. We still get requests for it from others.
It just goes into
I suppose we're asking, can we store our dirty data on your nicely organised things? We recognise that we've got to go forward and get to the hyperdata, but there's still an awful lot of storage requirement that's very dirty.
And I wonder whether that forward-looking, it's a nice idea, but the only thing I can see it applying to is genomes. They're written in CAGT. Everybody writes CAGTs, so they're all comparable, and you can easily compare one genome with another. I can imagine it working in genetics. I can't imagine it ever working in primate cognition or neurophysiology or social psychology. Whereas a couple of terabytes that I could drop things in would be immensely useful, and it would have things dropping in it.
And that's why we're reiterating, we're going around speaking to different disciplines and trying to understand.
I could get rid of that pile of hard drives in my room.
So I think that's a message, I guess, from here. Right? There would be a few people in the school who would benefit from the other model, right? And medicine and some of those other groups. But for many of us, we have this very idiosyncratic, lots of little things, and what we mostly need is just a good Dropbox type storage, right, that will allow us to not think about it most of the time and just know that it's okay. Because that's the way we have to work from day to day. Right?
I do fMRI. We have huge amount of data, 1 terabyte, and so for us the solution is just great. Thank you so much for this presentation. So do you have any idea about the cost? So how much would it cost us to store 1 terabyte of data?
Okay, the university is trying to recover cost with the storage area network. They are trying to recover costs where funding is available. When we are writing applications for funding, we've been asked to put in £1,000 per terabyte of data over 5 years. That's the current figure. But
that's probably over 5 years.
For 5 years.
Then
so
you
that's
chuck it
just.
out.
There are
Right. I thought it might mean something like that.
a lot of these cost models are based on a time-specific scale.
It's not appealing. I
No,
assure
it's
you
not
across
science.
the board that we're looking at things from decades ago,
Yeah.
going back to those raw data. We also have an obligation, if we publish it, anybody can say, can we see your data? And it doesn't matter how long ago, we should be able to reproduce these large chunks of that data that we've used, of the raw data. So I think any model that's based on that sort of thing is going to run into problems and conflicts with the publishing, with science.
No, I would say that your cost model's about right. I mean, if we want to store 2 terabytes, we can get a cheap disk for £100, but if we want a computer to run it, we need to spend about £2,000, and after 5 years that computer might break. So, I mean, I think we're all faced with this. The archive material is cheap. You just got a drive that you hope will be readable in a few years' time. But yeah, I mean, so you're saying if the money's available, that's what you'll be charging.
That's what we'd be charging. Again, it is useful to get your feedback into this process. We are aware of quite a lot of concern for people, for example, who are applying to NERC, where this amount of money might be seen as not presenting value for money. We are aware of some funders just stripping out, say, storage requirements as not being scientific but more general. So they say, okay, it's not really funding, we are funding research, what you're asking us to fund is storage. So there is a whole cluster of problems there. The important thing is that we are getting this feedback from you, and that we can represent it to the university, preferably in a way that is identifiable by researchers, so that whoever wants to question it can go back to the researcher. There is the other issue which comes from funders direct, that they are actually asking that the storage cost is analyzed on a project-by-project basis. So what data services like the UK Data Archive or the Archaeology Data Service have in place, and what has been accepted so far are pay once, store forever models, which are fairly generic. And it has been indicated at the workshop that I attended that this is not the way forward, and that this form of costing wouldn't be accepted. So there's a whole cluster of issues around charging. It's important that all of these concerns are being fed back to the university, where there are going to be strategies made, where there are going to be policies made, resulting in procedures. So it is important that decision makers realize what potential implications are and then decide on a way forward. And this is input that we are very limited in providing, because we are not sitting like you on the ground doing the research and having workflows in place that require potentially fairly idiosyncratic solutions, or require different periods of storage for data. So you might be okay with, say, active data storage, so that is data that you keep on working with for 5 years, and after that your data is going to be stored, say on a tape for archival purposes. But you might not be okay with 5 years active data storage. Indeed, you might keep working with your data actively for the rest of your careers. So then,
I worry about tape storage. Just the history of tapes is that they become unreadable after about 30, 40 years, and suddenly they evaporate. Possibly less.
It depends on the tape, and there has been some progress made, but yes, you're right. There need to be proper archival procedures in place. We don't want to repeat NASA's experience.
Just bouncing off that last point, I guess potential useful distinction to make is between data which we want to archive for the same reason we might archive a copy of a research paper, right? So the university has, a document repository for cases where we want to have either published stuff or appendices which didn't go in the article, and we want people to be able to forever, in theory, access, right, and provide a universal, pointer to. And maybe we have data that's of that kind, right, and that fits more with that kind of. Some of those sort of data models. We want that data to be available for other people to access in some way. But then we have data which is just part of the ongoing process of science, right? We just keep it around and we keep playing with it and do whatever we want to do with it. So in a sense, I think there's a pragmatic thing here, is that in some cases it's the issue of who loses. So if data that's associated with a funded project and publications gets lost, then there's there's an issue about that loss that the institution has a concern with, right? Because the institution's name is on that data in some sense. But there's other stuff which, if the data gets lost, it's just us that suffers. If I lose my data and I can't analyse it anymore, and it's my, I can't publish it, I can't do something with it, it's my loss, not the university's. So I just think sometimes there's a human component to this, right? Which is, in a sense, I take responsibility for the storage of the data, which, if lost, would only be of cost to me. Right? So I buy my £100 2 terabyte drive and I stick it on my desk and I plug it into my laptop every so often and I back stuff up.
Is that right though, really? Because it's a bigger picture than that, isn't it? If you lose your data that you could have otherwise written up, you could have written up a fantastic 4-star publication for REF that could be bringing in tens of thousands of pounds to the university. So it's more important than you're saying it is, I think.
But that's a low probability event, right? I mean, in a sense...
True, but if the building burned down tomorrow, how much data would we lose? A lot. Right? A lot of us who back up don't take it home every night. There's huge
so
risk.
I am oversimplifying.
I am oversimplifying.
But I guess the point of the distinction, right, is that there is some stuff which the university has a probabilistically high vested interest in, and then there's stuff that's really more our vested interest. Because I just think, my concern would be if there was a model in which the university invested gazillions of dollars in expensively backing up stuff. In a sense, the university is then paying for labour, which I otherwise cover. Do you know what I mean? So the £1,000, right, comes about because there's hardware infrastructure and labour being put in, which otherwise I'm doing, right? And so I guess that's my point, right? Is that it's not in my interest if the university, in fact, spends too much money on this, when I'd rather than spend money on actually helping me do my research. And I'm willing to put in some labour and some effort to maintain that. So I guess I'm just saying that those two things are in balance. And there isn't going to be, I don't think, a kind of a massive university takes all responsibility type solution. But we're probably too far in the I take responsibility zone at the moment. Right? So that's why it's good to have the conversation.
Any other questions? I have to wrap up soon.
Love that question, but so far we've only discussed internal data solutions. We haven't discussed collaborations, linking with other universities, whether any of these systems will match up with, even advertised systems. So I know it's 5 past the hour, but is there anything
that was on the project? It wasn't the research data management project. We were looking at collaboration and what would be required. So it's feedback that we do need to know is the fact that you do collaborate and how you collaborate.
I suppose we need to get a picture of what's happening now and where you want to be in terms of your data storage, and then it's up to us then to work with other people to try and find the most appropriate solution, taking all options into consideration, like you said, of the universities and institutions. Absolutely.
And I think also don't get caught up on the solution straight away, as opposed to how it is you want to work.
Absolutely.
And then see a solution for it.
That's very important.